at the law of diminishing returns for the price you pay in EV compared to how long it will take to do a 1,000-kilometer trip. And we're going to do so by doing a very simple chart that is going to be showing on the x-axis the price in thousands of pounds, and on the y-axis the duration it would take in hours to complete the 1,000-kilometer trip. Now, if you take a petrol car or diesel car, you are going to have a pretty horizontal curve that says, irrespective of the price, it's going to take the same time to complete the trip. So whether you've got a 100,000 kilometer Skoda or a brand new Porsche, well, it's going to take probably the same time to complete. You're going to make the same stops, and it's going to be the same duration. Now, for this exercise, we are going to be considering used price as well as new price, and we want to plot a number of EVs on that chart. Now, you do have some EVs over here that are quite old now, that are not very pricey. If I'm thinking of a Zoe, maybe a Lyft, I should have some EVs that are reasonably low price because they're used now, but they'll take a lot of time to complete. Who knows, maybe 15 hours, 20 hours. These were not really designed to take such a long 1,000-kilometer trip. At the other end of the spectrum, you might be getting an Audi e-tron GT or a Porsche Taycan, and these are going to be quite expensive, but they are going to be completing the trip pretty much like a petrol car would. It would be faster to charge than you will need to stop for convenience, comfort breaks, or eating a little bit, drinking a bit. Okay, now I think the curve is going to look like something like this. Okay, so we are going to dot with real cars and we're going to look for real values over here, but by the time we're done, I think this is what the EV curve will look like. And that EV curve means, of course, at some point the returns you're getting for investing more money into your car are going to be limited. So it's a lower diminishing returns. The duration it's going to take to complete the trip is going to be broadly similar, even if you put more money towards the car. Now, the final things we will be looking at is whether we do find some outliers that give you even better value for your money. So these are the cars that you should be looking for if you're looking to complete the longer trips, maybe even once a year, twice a year, but you want those cars that give you faster duration for a similar price. And these will be the cars that are below the EV curve. So now let's get into it. Let's put this on a real chart with real cars, and we're going to use AutoTrader as the basis for finding the price, used or new, of the cars we put on this curve, and we're going to use ABRP to get a sense of how long it would take to do that 1,000-kilometer trip. So here we have it. This is the curve with the actual details of the cars. So we've not mapped out every single car in the world. That's an EV, of course, but we have quite a few. And as expected, we start with some of the cheap EVs you can see on the used market. You can get an Ion, you remember those triplets, for about 6K. Now, it would take you about 22.5 hours to complete a 1,000-kilometer trip. I'm sure that would be a lot of fun. The Zoe 22, which of course was more of a car to go around the city, and I'm not even sure what kind of fast charging capabilities it has, that's a 22 hours. And that's also reasonably cheap, but that's not really what you're going to take to do 1,000 kilometers. Now let's look at the wider curve. This is our ICE car reference. We argued that it would take about 9.5 hours to do the 1,000 kilometers. Now technically it should be a bit less, but we've taken into account a 30 minutes pause for lunch, and then 2 times 15 to 20 minutes additional breaks. It's really the bare minimum you would use in terms of time to complete those 1,000 kilometers. Now we've tried to calibrate all of that. We looked at multiple sources. So I think we're there or thereabouts in terms of those comparisons. They're not completely made up. In fact, there's a famous Norwegian that takes more or less the same amount of time on a number of those cars, maybe 15 minutes less or something like that. So I think the calibration is thereabouts okay. Of course, we've looked at the bottom end with those used cars that are really not suited to 1,000 kilometers. At the top end, as we said when we went through the explanation at the start, this is our e-tron GT. It's £66,000 on the used car market. By the way, all the cars represented here would have less than 30,000 miles. And we're not taking the cheapest, but we're taking the number 4 cheapest car that we can find on the used car market. So £66,000, it would do it on almost 10 hours. So now we are extremely close to the time you would have done it on a petrol car. Supposedly, again, I don't do 1,000 kilometers in 9.5 hours with a petrol car. Definitely not. So this remains still a slightly theoretical exercise. But where it starts to become interesting is, I think, when you draw the line of the plus 20% from the ICE theoretical duration. Because I think if you look at that, now you're talking about real life usage. I don't think you really need to be at just the 9.5 hours. I think anytime up to 11 hours, maybe a bit above 11 hours, is completely reasonable, because you're going to use the stops to charge the car, but also to do something else. Maybe there's a dog in the back. Maybe there are a few kids that need stops and won't be driving for more than 2 hours at a time. So there's loads of good reasons why this purple curve may be more of the reasonable curve you would want to aim for. Now the question is, what is in that space? That would be the kind of cars you'd be interested in. So any car here is probably quite good at taking you on a 1,000 kilometer trip. Now, you get some of the classics. You get your Volkswagen ID.3, which is probably one of the best value for money as it stands, £20,000 in the UK. A Kona 64 is really good. A Niniro is also a very good choice there. Even the cheapest of the ENIACs, if you remember, it used to be at 32k new, maybe for a few months before it wasn't anymore. But now it's about 26k on the used car market. Of course, a Tesla Model 3, the Standard Range Plus, is going to do it for you, 26.5k and just below the 11-hour mark. Now, if you push it a little bit more to the right, in the 30 to 40k, you got your ENIAC, and of course the equivalent, you're going to find the ID.4 would be a very similar one. Q4, interestingly, is of course a bit more expensive than an ENIAC. It's the same battery, it's the same car, but of course a bit more expensive for some reason here. It shows it as being a bit slower as well. Not sure exactly why. Could be wheels, could be a number of things. But then, of course, the stars here are your Tesla Model 3, a long range at 33k, and then the Ioniq 5 on rear-wheel drive, long range. So that's the best combination because it's a pretty efficient car. Now, you can notice I didn't put the Ioniq 6. I'm a bit of a Hyundai fan, but Ioniq 6 would be a new car, so you're looking at least at the 45k mark. So you'd be looking somewhere around here as well. So that's it. That's kind of the cars that will do it. But if you really push it and you're interested on the lower price points, well, for me, we are here, right? So that's the Ioniq 28. It's still a very capable car. If you remember, we said let's look for the outliers that are below the average, right? Well, the Ioniq 28 is kind of in a unique position, you know. Ioniq 28, in fact, the Corsa is very well placed there. It's only 14K on the used car market. You can take it on a 1,000-kilometer trip. The E208 is a bit more expensive, a bit more fancy, looks a bit better if you ask me from the outside. MG5, also a very good reference. You know, how many taxis are MG5 these days? And the Leaf 62 is surprisingly well placed in here. Now you're still at 12 hours, and I would personally be very cautious about all the Leafs because they don't have the cooling, either air cooling or water cooling. But you know, you do have some choices a little bit above the 11-hour mark. Yes, you are at 12 hours, but you've got some choices that are now sub 20K. If you go back there, there's the stuff that you're not going to entertain. You know, you don't take a Honda E, which is a car for the city. You don't take a BMW i4, probably. This is stretching the limits. Maybe a 400 kilometers a trip or 500 is going to be fine, but 1,000, probably not. Okay. Now, interestingly, and I feel like this was a choice for me at some point, but the MJ ZS EV, this is too much, right? You can see that the charging capabilities are not going to cut it. And the Ioniq 38, which is a fantastic choice if you live in the UK and you're going to stay in the UK, because the distances are just too short unless you do London, Scotland all the time. Well, the Ioniq 38, fantastic proposition, but doesn't quite cut it versus the EV curve. Because it's quite a bit above, or it's just very good value, 13.7K, that's what you pay, but it would take you 14 hours. So not really a choice for those people, and I find myself in that category that will want once, twice a year to do a 1,000-kilometer trip. So that's it. That's the EV curve, the blue curve, goes to show the law of diminishing returns. The more you spend afterwards, the less you gain in terms of reduction of that duration. You've got your bargain cars, so the Ioniq 28, Corsa E, ID3, Kona 64, e-Niro, Ioniq 5, Tesla Model 3, even long range, fantastic at 33K. You know, so you've got quite a few choices over here. And then, of course, if you're going to buy new, I've put the Avenger here. This is not going to be quite as good value for money. Let me know what you think. I hope that was of some use. If you think it needs additional points, I might continue and update the chart. Let me know how you would use this. Does that help you decide what car you're going to go for, or it just confirms the choices that you've made already? Thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.